We were talking about this transition to bluegrass from jazz. You mentioned Amanda is from Kentucky. There we go. I'm in Louisville. I'm a Kentucky guy, so Amanda's now my new favorite member. No offense.
Oh yeah, no, none
so
taken.
She brings in the bluegrass influence, and just tell me how that sort of migrated through jazz musicians, and what's that transition like? Because I would imagine those two genres, while there's a lot of similarities in a lot of ways, I would think they're pretty different.
Well, that's the beautiful thing about it, is they are pretty different, but in some really fundamental ways, they're almost exactly the same. Like the spirit of jazz and bluegrass is improvisation.
Yep.
And the way that you approach it in jazz and bluegrass is just a little different. And then that little difference is what builds the genre as a whole. You know, it's like, because in bluegrass, you take these small breaks over short sections. You know, at the most, you just do the form once, and then you go to the next guy. Whereas in jazz, when you take an improvisational time, you take it until you're done, and then you pass it to the next guy. So it's like a much longer form improvisation, which makes for like a lush harmonic landscape. And bluegrass is a bit more driving and like sharp.
Yeah.
And the tunes are shorter, and you know, I mean, you know, so from my perspective as a dude who's just playing guitar, it's just like I just have to learn how to do it a little differently, and then it's actually just kind of the same thing.
Interesting. Never thought of it that way.
Me neither.
So, all right. So Amanda brings the bluegrass influence, and I was going to ask this question without, you know, knowing that Amanda was from Kentucky. When I think of bluegrass, I certainly don't think of Utah. Is it big there at all, or is this just really she brought it with her?
No, it's. I mean, there's definitely a scene here in a community. It's just a little bit more spread out. I mean, there's a lot of and the Utah bluegrass scene is also pretty contained. We have a couple outliers. Notably, Jake Workman is like, you know, he grew up here in Sandy, Utah. And so, you know, it's like we always have people who grow up who are pickers, and then most of them just leave and go somewhere else. So there's not like a scene here in Utah per se. But that's one thing Amanda brought, is like not only the bluegrass sound, but also like the community nature of bluegrass.
Yeah.
Which is one thing that I really, really was drawn to, is the fact, you know, it's just like how much actual picking you do in bluegrass communities. Because when Amanda joined the band, we kind of got our sound dialed together into what it is today. And then we started playing festivals, and then bluegrass festivals are like the best thing because everybody there is a musician, and it's just like you just carry your instrument around, and no matter, you run into somebody who's like, what kind of guitar you got? And they're like, oh, you want to see it? And then before you know it, it's 40 minutes later, and you've just been playing your favorite songs with your new best friend. And that's like, that's the stuff right there. That's the special sauce of bluegrass.
I love the way you describe that. It's so true.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, there's something in it, and I've told this story. The audience is probably getting bored of me telling this, but my earliest memories of music that sort of formulated what I, you know, enjoy listening to today were Friday nights when I was a kid. My parents would take me to a friend's house, and they would have basically a picking and grinning session. You know, with, you know, 5 or 6, you know, musicians they would all come over and bring their guitars and their banjos and their fiddles and their mandolins, and they would just play. And so the kids would run around, and I would kind of walk through the living room, but I was always listening to those sessions. And it was you're right. It's very much a community, and you're just there with people who, it doesn't really matter if you know them or not. If you've got an instrument, you're going to be like, well, what do you play? What do you know? Let's play something. And that just happens. It's really, really neat, organic.